Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and I want to start this week thanking all the folks that work at the summit at Snoqualmie, or any resort really, for the hard work they put in every day, especially when it's bitter cold like it's been lately. I know being a lifty is a thankless job, but thank you, especially to the ones who knock the snow off my chairs. That makes a difference. What else makes a difference is having the right gear. And between my outdoor research heated gloves, my outdoor research puffy, or my snow crew jacket and pants, I was so warm the past few days. My kid was rocking a similar outdoor research fit, and even though it was -3 degrees out there, he asked to shed a layer because he was too warm. So while it can be cold out there, if you have the right gear, it doesn't matter. What else doesn't matter is how I record this podcast. But one thing I do want to talk about is how I do my interviews, even though it doesn't matter. When I started this podcast, I knew that 90% of what I recorded would be remote. I just didn't have the money to fly places or do interviews like maybe some other podcasts that lived in ski towns or things like that. And during that time, other podcasters subtly clowned me because I was recording that way. But I didn't care because I felt my content was noticeably better. But the way I do things is so much harder than in-person interviews. The reason I know that is because I do both in-person and remote interviews. And with in-person interviews, it is so easy to get people to talk. I did one last week, and when I'm listening to the edit, it was like, wow, I really didn't have to say that much, and they went off on a tangent because I'm sitting right there and they want to tell me that story. But when I'm doing these remote interviews, when I set this up, I decided to challenge myself and make it as hard as I possibly could. So I decided to do it with no video. It was just 2 voices. And now that I think about it, that makes it so much harder. If I would have started doing these interviews with a FaceTime where I could actually see my guests, I think I would maybe make it easier on myself to pull out the stories. But like I said, I wanted to challenge myself, and I'm stupid, so I've never used that video part. The only time I see my guests is when I do an in-person interview. So with these remote ones, when it's just 2 voices, it makes it so much harder. I mean, some people just don't like talking about themselves. And if it's a remote interview, I really have to pepper them with questions to get the story out. And that was the case with my guest this week, Logan Pehota. Logan is a legacy skier, son of Eric Pehota, and a skier known for dropping the biggest cliffs, tricking in the backcountry, and letting his skiing do the talking. Well, this week, I had to get Logan talking a little bit. And while I could tell that talking about himself is not his favorite thing to do, I got the story out of him. Before we get into it and I share that story with you, I want to ask you to tell your friends about the show, subscribe wherever you listen, and if you want some Powell Movement stickers to slap around your town, email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com and I will get you those stickers. All of these things really do help the show grow, and my final ask of you is that you please support my incredible sponsors. I only work with the best brands, ones that I really love and use. They are Elan Skis, Stanley, Outdoor Research, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Best Day Brewing. Now, it's time to talk with Logan Pehota. You're named after Mount Logan, and there's a backstory to your name. There's a trip that your dad and Trevor Peterson were on. Can you tell the backstory of your name?
Oh man, I just know that my dad and Trevor, I don't even know if Trevor was with him, both times at least. They tried to climb Mount Logan back in the day. So I don't think my dad successfully made it to the top. I think he said he got weathered out. But yeah, my brother and I are both named after mountains.
Yeah, and I think that trip was like a 27 or 30-day trip that they were out in the backcountry, living in tents and trying to make it happen. I thought you were going to have a much deeper story to it, but you know what? That's quite all right. Your dad and Trevor Peterson pioneered the mountains around where you live and beyond, and those two are always going to be linked to Canadian badassery in the mountains. And to do what they did was much harder than it is to do what we do today. I mean, to get around the mountains, they didn't have the gear that we have today, so it's a lot harder.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy back then. I mean, even now, it's wild what the mountaineers are doing, but I couldn't even imagine it back then. It was kind of ridiculous, honestly.
But back then, it was like all about their blue-collar work ethic. Like, they weren't afraid to go put their boots in the snow and stay out there for a month at a time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and knowing that your dad has that ingrained in him, does that make your childhood really hard? Like, was there a ton of manual labor and minimal TV watching for you?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of slave labor, I called it, but, just helping out around the property. I just remember all my friends getting allowances and getting paid to help work on their parents' properties and whatnot, but not the case where I'm from. Not much TV either. Not much video games. It's funny, once I moved out is when I started playing video games. Probably a sterner upbringing than most of the kids these days, that's for sure.
And then when you think about like the hardest things that you had to do growing up, what was the toughest thing that your dad made you do?
And I don't even know anymore. I'm 28 now. I can barely even remember 5 years ago. It seems like so many things are happening. I don't know. I guess maybe hiking Mount Curry and stick camping at the top when I was young, you know. There was no hiking trail. It's a monster peak out in Pemberton, straight all the way up. I don't know. Maybe that's probably one of the harder things, but that was fun too for me back then. But firewood. Oh, that's it. Firewood. I hated getting firewood. I still hate getting firewood.
I mean, are you the dude splitting, stacking, and just doing all the hard shit work that no one wants to do? You're pretty much an intern for your dad?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we all do it. My brother, my mom, my dad, we always go out and get firewood all the time. But we don't have the power splitter. It's all hand by axe. He's always like, oh, it's a good workout. It's a good workout. I'm like, I don't care about the workout. It's more about the efficiency.
Right. And so your dad's this talented badass and hard ass. How about your mom? Is she a badass athlete as well?
My mom's a badass. I don't know if she's an athlete per se, but you know, she loves skiing. She's still biking all the time. It's funny, she's like crashes all the time and she's what, 56 now? I'm like, Mom, you gotta relax. Like, can't keep crashing and coming back with bruises or going to get stitches.
Yeah.
It's funny.
And so, it makes me want to think that your parents like to get after it. But when your mom gets pregnant, does the whole family settle down a little bit? Like, does your dad quit his life of risk when you come along?
No, I know he quit snowmobiling when my brother and I were born when we were young. I mean, I'm sure he wouldn't have liked to, but more of a sacrifice financially wise. But he kept skiing professionally till I want to say we were like 10 or so, you know. Obviously, I'm sure he mitigated his risks in the backcountry and wasn't pushing himself and putting him in places where he could ultimately lose his life, as, you know, one would do with a family that they need to support.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like when you come around, that's when he starts Whistler Jet Boat, and he's got the pro ski career going as well. He's got income coming from the Whistler Jet Boat thing. And with jet boats, they run in like inches of water. And how fast do those things go?
Oh, man. I mean, his jet boat only goes 60, 70 kilometers an hour. But I mean, there's jet boats out there with turbines on them that are going 200 miles an hour or whatnot.
Jesus.
It's more about getting there, not how fast. And you don't even want to go that fast on the river, especially in the technical stuff. Like, the slower you can go is honestly the better, the safer, the easier, less expensive.
I've never been jet boating. And when someone goes and rents a jet boat or goes with your dad and goes and gets taken out, is it all about going slow and enjoying the river? Is it about like going fast and getting that roller coaster like feeling?
It's definitely a roller coaster, but the trip has got all parts of it, you know. Scenery, he tells a story, talks about the wildlife, the mountains, the history of Pemberton and such. But then once you get into the whitewater, it's full jet boating, roller coaster style. You'll have people screaming, getting soaked. You know, it's not like boating on the lake or the ocean. People are always like, oh, jet boating looks so fun. It's like, it's pretty stressful, you know? There's money on the line and there is ultimately lives on the line, you know? Whitewater's dangerous. Moving water's dangerous, especially when there's wood in the river and rocks and stuff like that.
Yeah. But really, your life isn't all about jet boating. It's about skiing. And you start in a backpack with your dad, but he's not just showing you the mountains. Your dad skis real lines with you in the backpack, right?
Jeez, again, I can't even remember. I just see the pictures. I'm sure he was a bit different than the normal dads and whatnot, taking us around in the backpacks, that's for sure.
Then from the backpack, you get put into the Whistler Valley program that pretty much grooms you for what's next in skiing. I feel like that thing teaches you how to ski, and then you get to a point where you graduate into either race or moguls. And during this time, when you're in that program, is it like you're doing the program during the weeks or the weekend days, and then you go out in the backcountry with your dad? Is he taking you out there early on?
Yeah, exactly. So the Whistler Mountain Ski Club is basically, it was like daycare, really, you know, during the week. So he would go drop us off and then he'd go skiing. I had two coaches that were awesome to me, Gavin Phillips and Drew Hetherington. Big shout out to those guys when I was younger. They taught me everything I know other than my dad. But yeah, like you said, he'd drop me off during the week. We go skiing and then he'd take us out on the weekends. So we're basically skiing all week, every week during the winter.
And when you ski with your dad, I'm sure it's fun, but I'm sure he makes it hard as well. There's probably some hiking and some different stuff. But did he make it scary too? Did he challenge you at a young age?
It was definitely hard. We were hiking lots. I remember that. I also, I hated hiking. I was like, I don't want to go hiking. I just want to go in the chair,
Right.
like the normal kids. But he was obviously bringing us to the deeper snow, the untracked zones. And then, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's so hard to say back then, but I'm sure I was scared. I'm sure he was pushing me. That's what makes you kind of go beyond the level of the average skiers and whatnot.
For sure. And really, you're probably the youngest person I've had on this podcast who was in a ski movie really, really young. You were in a Warren Miller segment when you were like 6 years old. And in that segment, it shows your dad towing you and your brother on sleds, on his snowmobile. And what other kind of high-risk, fun kind of shit did your dad do with you and your brother?
Oh, when we were younger, I mean, I feel like we just did normal kid stuff. I mean, maybe I guess getting towed behind a snowmobile on a GT racer is a bit abnormal. It depends where you're from, but we didn't do anything too crazy, you know. He's a dad, he's trying to keep us safe. Same with my mom. You know, we're just mountain biking, kind of, normal mountain kid stuff.
Okay. And then when it was time to pick between the race program or the mogul program, when you get to that age, how do you end up choosing racing?
I mean, I didn't like racing really, but my dad always told me that it's a great foundation, and you can tell if somebody's ski raced or not by just looking at the way they ski. And he always told me things and showed me videos, Hugo Harrison, he's like, oh, he raced, you can tell he's solid. Yeah, he basically just wanted my brother and I to have a good base. And I mean, ultimately, I think he wanted us to succeed in ski racing because, that's where more money is inevitably, like in the sport. And I think he wanted us to be ski racers, but my brother and I were just so underdeveloped at the time. Like I was such a late bloomer, like basically didn't hit puberty till like 17, 18, didn't have a freaking hair on my body.
So you were the tiny kid the whole time you were racing, like a 130-pound kid?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that makes it really hard to get the speed that you need. And I'm sure in a place like Whistler, the race team and the scene is really competitive. I mean, there's got to be a ton of people with a ton of talent. And you had to take things pretty seriously. Like if you weren't doing well, your dad got pissed, right?
Yeah, what do you call himself? The Russian coach.
Was he like a yeller?
Oh, I can't even remember. I remember him calling himself the Russian coach, so probably. But, like you were saying, it was competitive in Whistler. There's 4 kids that I used to ski race that are on the Canadian national team, which is, crazy to think. It's awesome to see them on the TV and the Olympics and stuff, racing and killing it. But, it's what we competed with growing up.
So if you had a bad race, did you know that you were going to have to go leave the finish corral, see your dad, and he was going to be pissed off? And that was like intimidating for you?
But probably. I mean, if we made a stupid mistake, he's not going to be stoked on that.
What happens if you do well? Was it like high fives and hugs, or was it just kind of that's what's expected?
Can't remember. Probably not too many hugs. Definitely some high fives. I'm sure there's hugs and high fives if we did well. But, always want more. Always pushing for more.
And then when you think about your dad taking you and your brother out in the backcountry, is it like a big backcountry safety, like almost class every time you go out there? Is he constantly teaching you different things about how to be safe in the backcountry?
I mean, when I was younger, I can't remember, but even when I learned the snowmobile, which I was 19, I think, when I bought my first sled, and he had just kind of got back into it, that's when I kind of really, really learned about the mountains, because you're really traveling through big terrain with nothing around you, That was even before the satellite phones or whatever, InReaches, Oleos. So he was making sure that we're making good decisions out there, and I can tell I still use that decision making to this day.
Did he ever take you out with some of his ski friends? Because I'm assuming that they're all like leathery, badass mountain men, kind of like the crew where if you go out on a sled and something breaks, they're going to take some straps and fix it up. And that's kind of the mentality you're ingrained with, is like fix it out on the road.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you can't, he always, I don't know, I feel like he always said, if you can't work on it or you can't fix it, you don't really deserve to ride it, sort of thing. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but if you get stranded out there, you got to figure out a way to fix it and get back, because nobody's coming to pick you up, sort of deal.
So were you always kind of in the shop working on engines and snowmobiles and different stuff when you were growing up, and you know your way in and out of an engine pretty well nowadays?
Yeah, exactly. My dad, I mean, to afford the lifestyle that he wanted to live. He'd rather do it himself than pay somebody to do it. You know how expensive it is to bring your car to a shop.
Yeah.
Freaking costs an arm and a leg for most people. So, do it yourself, save that money, and you put it towards snowmobiling. You put it towards fuel,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So basically, just taught me to do everything yourself. And you can learn everything on YouTube anyways. Don't need to go pay somebody to do it unless you're lazy or just not willing to learn.
That is true. And during this time you're racing, you're like in high school, 15, 16 years old, but the whole landscape of skiing is changing. The new school is happening. And are you lapping the Nintendo Park when you aren't ski racing?
Oh yeah, exactly. Even when I was ski racing, I was dipping out to go hit the jumps and stuff. Yeah, well, it's just crazy nowadays. Like I see the kids that didn't ski race, they're still solid and technical, but their level of ability, because they're just doing backflips and whatnot since they're, well, it's crazy now, but 12 or whatever. Learning tricks back then as a ski racer was pretty, I don't want to say unheard of, but definitely wasn't common.
No, but I mean, it's like your foundation is probably more solid than theirs because of your ski racing. And then their air awareness and almost gymnastic ability in the air is probably more solid than yours just because that's what they've been doing their whole life. But it's not like you can't mix it together, which you eventually did.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when you think about the culture, are you watching the ski movies and the X Games and are you on New Schoolers and stuff like that? Or is it more all about doing it for you?
It was definitely more about doing it. Honestly, I didn't watch barely any ski movies growing up, which might sound crazy, but I feel like I didn't watch very many movies at all growing up, but definitely not ski movies. I really only started watching them once I started filming with Matchstick Productions, which was, I guess, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I was 23. I had one appearance when I was 16 in an MS movie, and of course I watched that, but other than that, I really didn't watch ski movies growing up.
Which is just so wild, but it does make sense because it seems like your dad is one of those doers who's always out in the field, always wanting to be outside, and you didn't grow up watching TV and doing that kind of stuff, so it makes sense that you're out there doing things all the time. And with ski racing, is there a moment where you realize that you're not going to make it in the ski race world and you have to almost pull the plug on ski racing? And is that a hard thing to tell your dad, like, hey, I'm done with it after all these years?
No, I told my parents, well, they knew I was starting to dislike it. Who wants to go wear spandex and minus 20, 30 Celsius? It's not fun. At least it wasn't fun for me. And it's not fun if you're not winning either, which towards the end of my ski racing career, like I said, everybody was getting bigger. I was staying the same size and I just couldn't compete. And it's expensive too. So there was no hard feelings or tension of me leaving the ski racing scene at all.
And it's funny because you were tiny when you were a ski racer, but I met you a few years back and it's like, I don't know your height and weight, but it seemed like you were like a linebacker type build, like a big guy, but your build just hurts you in the ski race world because you didn't have that size. Would you have been a lot better had you have developed at 15 years old?
Yeah, I would imagine so. Not painting the picture that you need to be developed to compete at a younger age, but definitely helps. Inertia, mass, stuff like that, power.
So you transition to park and pipe, and that happens in like 2011 or something like that. You're about 16 years old. You learn all four doubles, which is incredible. Do you have goals of making the Olympic team? Is that where your head is at that point?
Yeah, it was. That was exactly it. I thought this was the next big thing. I thought this was something I could do too. Something to be on the main stage and really make a living and a career out of skiing. It kind of was just like the competitions were just not fun. I was like, why am I hucking my meat onto like ice and like these bad conditions? And I just had this one bad year where I went to all the competitions down in the States and it was just bad weather for like 3 of the 4 comps. And I was just like, oh, this isn't worth it. I'm not really having a fun time doing this.
So you have that and you're not having the most fun doing it. But then it's like 2011, I think you enter Wrangle the Chute, a big mountain comp at Kicking Horse for the first time, and you take third at that one. That big mountain contest format, does it almost unlock a whole new kind of ski comp for you that you get hooked on for a bit?
I think so. Yeah, for sure. Like that Wrangle the Chute, I was young competing against adults and it was more just relatable to the skiing that I grew up doing and what I knew how to do confidently, really.
So is it one of those things where you don't have the nerves of like a park contest where you're looking at a 120-foot jump? You're like actually feel like you're at home in the backcountry?
It's funny. The big mountain competitions, they're scary, Whoever tells you they're not is clearly not going for top of the podium. There's a lot of variables in them, but I think I was just more, like I said, accustomed to doing it, and it better suited my talents.
And while that contest was awesome, I would think the highlight of that season was getting invited to the Red Bull Cold Rush. How does that one come together?
Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, I was 16. I don't know. I got the invite through Greg Strokes, my Oakley rep. He's a legend, been doing it forever. But I was unfortunate. I broke my arm on the first day, but I still got to see and watch and see what all the pros and the big guys were getting up to. It was cool.
And I think that trip, people remember you from a big 360 you stomped there, and you were like a little kid among men, and that's all before you broke your arm.
Yeah.
Is that what kind of helps you earn your Red Bull helmet, or does that happen later?
That happened later for sure. 7 years later. And that would probably was kind of stem from the Freeride World Tour and stuff.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and I want you to buy all of your ski and snowboard gear from Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. Why Peter Glenn? Well, first and foremost, they're the little guy who's been getting people out on snow for over 65 years. They aren't trying to take over an industry by making a ton of branded products that compete with the brands they already sell. They're not trying to get you to stay at a hotel or sell you a vacation. Peter Glenn is about making sure you purchase the right products to ensure that you're going to have the most fun on the hill. And they have all the brands, all the products, and incredible deals both in-store and online. While other retailers focus on algorithms and AI, Peter Glenn is all about having the most knowledgeable staff that understands what you need. And if you've been following them on Instagram, they've been dropping some incredible pro tips that will make your time on the hill more enjoyable. At the end of the day, people have trusted Peter Glenn since 1958 because of their proven track record and all-around passion for snow and beyond. So if you ski, snowboard, inline skate, wakeboard, water ski, or need outerwear for your adventure, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports is your one-stop shop, and they offer free shipping on orders over $50, a hassle-free return policy, and they price-match reputable dealers. So please support this podcast and buy your stuff over at peterglenn.com. Next up, it's Elan Skis. I started telling you about Elan building a cult following in the States about 3 years ago. And if you're like me and heading up to the mountain on a weekly basis, I know you've been seeing more Elans. There's a reason for that. People who ski Elans notice that skiing on award-winning products made in what is considered the best factory in the world will make them a better skier. The product they put into the marketplace is second to none. I mean, Elan's a company that also makes luxury yachts, and they don't cut corners on materials or production. The difference in quality is noticeable. Walk up to any ski wall and compare the craftsmanship of an Elan ski to everything else on the wall. You'll see a difference in the fit and finish, but the most important difference is how they'll perform on snow. That's why Elan's been winning a ton of awards at the magazine test, because they really do ski better. If you want to have more fun on the mountain this season, get on an Elan. You can find out about all things Elan over at elanskis.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley, and if you haven't been hearing a lot about Stanley lately, you must be living under a rock. They've absolutely blown up in 2023, and everyone is talking about them. I've been telling you about how incredible their products are at keeping your drinks hotter and colder than anyone else's for about 7 years now. I mean, they invented the category in 1913, and while they always have done well, the world now knows that if you don't have a Stanley, you don't have the best. And I love having the best. Personally, I use Stanley pint glasses every single day, and I swear by them. And my wife and so many others can't live without their Stanley quenchers. And recently, I've integrated Stanley food storage devices into my ski routine. Instead of buying $20 burgers, we bring our food to the mountain and it stays piping hot in our Stanleys. And I end up saving about $70 a weekend not buying food. While that's rad, what's even radder is that Stanley offers Powell Movement listeners their biggest discount that they make available to the public. I'm going to save you 30% on all your Stanley products. Here's what you need to do to get that discount. Head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and at checkout, enter the code SNOW30. That's all caps and the number 30 with no spaces, and you'll save that 30%. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Being at that Red Bull Cold Rush event, does it almost change your view of what being a pro skier can be when you see all these rock stars getting the Red Bull treatment?
Yeah, it was crazy. All the pros were there. I was just a little kid. It was cool. And like you said, I was looking up to my fans and like my idols there. It was kind of all time.
Is it intimidating at all when your idols are all right there and they're watching you?
Yeah, I'm sure the nerves were pumping back then. I feel like any competition, the nerves are pumping. At least for me, they were. Yeah, if you ain't getting nervous, that's pretty impressive. And if you're still doing well.
And I would think when you go to an event like this, where there's all these big names who know the history of skiing, they are all well aware that your dad is Erik Pehota. Does that almost put a target on your back? Like having your dad be who he was, does that put pressure on you as contests and just a skier where everybody's going to watch to see if you're as good as your dad? Do you ever feel that?
That's one thing I never really felt. And I think maybe why is because obviously the era and maybe kind of a bit of a different discipline. Like he was really into the mountaineering. I don't know. Yeah, I guess I could just didn't really ever look at it in that perspective.
And I guess too, like all the young people that are your peers, they have no idea who your dad is. It's like all their parents know
Yeah,
who he was.
exactly. I still get that all the time. Oh, I used to, watch your dad. Oh, your dad, like, stuff like that. It's funny. And then I get their kids coming up who are like stoked on me. And then like the dads will show up and they're like, oh, stoked on my dad.
That's pretty funny. And then, thinking of your dad and he was with Rossi forever, does his career open up doors for you in terms of ski sponsorship? I mean, do you get skis pretty much your whole life because of your dad and then eventually because of you?
Yeah, for sure. It was the family program. I've been sponsored by Rossignol since I was born, basically. My first pair of skis were Rossignol, and I know my dad never paid for them. So I've been family with a lot of my sponsors since day one, really.
Who were the ones that you were born into? Was it like Rossignol, Lakey, Oakley?
Yeah, basically those three.
What brands get you into MSP in 2012? Because you're in Superheroes of Stoke, and they usually don't just put a kid in a movie who doesn't have sponsors paying their way. Is there a brand that helps you get in the movie, or do they just put you in?
I think it was just, yeah, MSP maybe taking a gamble and maybe Oakley. But yeah, like back then, it was really hard to get into ski movies. Like your sponsors had to be coughing up big bucks. And I'm envious of kids these days or young athletes these days because there's lots of people that don't even have to go compete or like kind of prove themselves. They just can start filming right away, which I would have loved to do.
I mean, it's crazy how the model has changed because it used to be you compete until you make a name for yourself and then you quit competing so you can go film and do that for the rest of your career, which is
exactly
what you did.
Yeah, exactly. And I got the wild card into the Freeride World Tour and I was pretty torn. Honestly, like never even heard of it, didn't even know what it was. And I was like, should I do this? And my dad and like my mom are like, yeah, if you want to keep moving forward skiing, you should do this because things will come from it. And that's exactly what happened.
All right. Well, we're going to go back from the Freeride World Tour to Superheroes of Stoke. And when you hear you're going to be part of one of the big movies in skiing, what are the thoughts that run through your head? Because I'm sure that's like the dream coming true at a young age.
Yeah, it was. I think maybe they were looking for the next kind of protege, Sean Pettit thing. And I went heli skiing, I think 2 days, and just didn't maybe leave enough wow factor to make him kind of pull the trigger and get me in there full time sort of deal.
Yeah, because it looked like you did one and done with them when you were 16 or 17 years old. Then you don't film with them for a few years. I was going to ask why was that, but you feel like it was because you just didn't wow them right away?
I mean, it's hard to say, but I'm sure somebody got hurt and there was an open seat, so they decided to give me a call, something like that. And yeah, exactly. Probably didn't leave a lasting enough impression to make it back, from 17 years old onwards.
When you first go and film with MSP, you go with Eric Horlifson. What does that guy teach you? Because he seems like he's a mentor to anybody he's around, and he's so smart when it comes to product, picking lines, everything about skiing. And does he teach you a lot when you're out in the field with him?
I mean, that day I lost my ski on my like second line and I couldn't find it in the snow. So I basically just watched Eric shred this. He like skied like 3 sick lines. I think he like hurt his knee earlier that year and he basically filmed his segment in those like 3 days. So I was just watching and learning. He was focused on doing his job. So I was just chilling, watching. It was fun though.
Is that just an embarrassing moment when you're on your first big shoot with MSP and you lose your ski?
Yeah, that wasn't definitely not ideal. I don't even think I was that bummed about it though at the time, but I never go filming anymore in the heli without one extra ski in the basket.
That was the lesson learned there. Make sure you're dialed.
Yeah, for sure.
You're in school this whole time. Is there ever any thought of going to university, or do you always plan on working hard and skiing?
Basically every fall, I'm from a small town, so a lot of my friends started going to university and college and stuff. And there was a lot of times in the fall, it's like, it wasn't that fun. Didn't really have any friends left. And I was like, oh, I wish I could just go, live that kind of normal life and go to college and hang out, party and stuff. But then again, I also was like, I don't want to be gone all winter. Then I don't get to ski or snowmobile.
Right.
So I was torn, but it was still a bit of a no-brainer. I always say, like, maybe in another life, I'll get to try that out.
All right. Well, when you finish high school, I think that's when you get into logging. And that's one of the more dangerous jobs on the planet. But when you work in a dangerous job like that outside of the ski world, there's some real money to be made. How much money can you make in a summer of logging?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was just out of high school when I started heli logging, and I was making $500 a day.
Oh, wow.
Which was, that's pretty good for straight out of high school, no skills. And that was also that was 10 years ago, actually. So yeah, I think I made like 50 grand that summer, and I bought a sled and a truck.
Dude, that's amazing.
It's what I tell all these ski bums that I see like just charging the hill. I'm like, go to the rigs this summer. Don't go home and freaking hang out. Like, they're always like, oh, I want to go sledding. I want to go sledding. I was like, go get a job. It's the only way. Like, you're not going to inherit a sled or win a sled or something. So, it's kind of advice. If somebody wants to get out there sooner than later, go to the oil rigs or something. Go log and do something. Do a camp job, and you can make it happen in that year.
Dude, 50 grand in 4 months or something like that is incredible.
Yeah, 6 months.
6 months. But when you're working that job, it's definitely a scary thing, I would think, just because of the risk factor of the work that you're doing. But then you're not working with people that are like Whistler folks, I wouldn't feel like. I think it's like probably some people that like to work hard, some people that are the dregs of society. And when you work with people like that, and then you have chainsaws mixed in, what are the things that you saw that were almost like mind-blowing and game-changing to you? I mean, do you see any serious injuries with the chainsaws?
Yeah, there was a faller that died the second year I was out there. And he was actually friends with some people I know in Pemberton, but we weren't working directly together. The funny thing is, Trevor Peterson actually used to work for the company that I was working for. And I think that's kind of how my dad got me in there.
Okay.
So the guys knew Trevor, at least, or my boss used to be Trevor's boss, which I thought was pretty cool. Yeah, it's definitely the hardest work I've ever done in my life.
The easiest money that you could have had in your entire life was probably, and it wouldn't be the easiest because this is a crazy contest, but in 2014, there was an event in Fernie called Monster Enemy Lines. And the more I looked into it, that has to be one of the cooler contests that I've seen, or an idea for a contest, where they just put you on the top of a head wall, a bunch of people, and it's pretty much like first one down wins, it looks like. Was that a pretty rad contest?
Yeah, that was a bittersweet. It was winner takes all, 20 grand. This was actually just before I think I went to go heli logging. Who knows? I might have not even gone heli logging if I won that 20 grand.
Right.
But yeah, it was cool. It was basically top to bottom, top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain. First one down wins. And it was kind of luck of the draw who was going to get the starting lines at the top. Like, some people had like mandatory airs out, and I got super lucky. I had the most like direct line. I basically just like did 3 turn straight lines and then was onto the groomer tucking. And again, I swear, if I would have weighed more, I would have won that because I got caught on the flats.
Yeah, you definitely had a big lead on Stan Ray, it looked like. And Stan, He's known for killing it in skier cross. I think he's got a bunch of X Games gold medals there. And is it like his wax tech and his skier cross experience that pays off and beats you?
I had good wax. I was staying at my dad's friend's place who owned a ski shop, and he had the good wax. I'm blaming it fully on the weight difference there.
All right. Well, next up, or the next big thing that you get invited to, is the Swatch Skiers Cup. It's a huge event with big names from all over the globe. And does Seth Morrison personally invite you?
Yeah, that was crazy. That was basically where it all started for the competitions. And he invited me because, again, when I was younger, I got to go on a trip with Poor Boys, and I went to Alaska with him. Kind of a bust of a trip. The snow wasn't great. So once again, like, I didn't really get the chance to kind of show my abilities, which might have hindered me getting into the filming scene directly right away. But yeah, he invited me to go to that competition, and, definitely not going to say no to that.
Yeah. This is your first big Euro trip, and you guys were treated like kings. Can you describe that experience?
Yeah, it was crazy. Was I 18 or 19? I don't know.
It was right there, yeah.
Yeah, we were staying like in the fanciest hotel in Zermatt, eating the best food. It was quite a shock to me. And the mountains, even just seeing that Zermatt peak there, it's huge. And it was definitely shocking coming from Pemberton, first time to Europe, first time seeing the crazy kind of scene there.
Your dad doesn't take you to travel to five-star hotels with Michelin chefs and spa treatments all the time, right? That was all new to you?
That was definitely new to me. I was like, this is nice. I can get used to this.
With that trip, that's another who's who of skiers, kind of just like the Cold Rush. And when you're in Europe with a group of skiers like that, I'm sure you spend a lot of time with a lot of people. Who are the skiers that you leave there with? You're like, man, that dude was really, really rad, and I'm going to be good friends with that guy from here on out.
Fabio Studer.
Okay.
I had actually met him at the summer camps on Blackcomb Glacier. And so he still is like one of my main Euro friends. And that's definitely somebody I was hanging out with. And so meeting a lot of the kind of other Euro guys through him.
And you bring up the glacier, and that's where everybody went in the summer at Whistler when it was open, but I think it's kind of gone now because of global warming, unfortunately.
Yep.
But did you do race camps on the glacier, or were you doing the high north type camps? What were you focused on the glacier?
I did the race camps when I was racing, and then I did the high north, and then Camp of Champions and Momentum. I sound like a spoiled brat when I say that all loud, but definitely lucky to get to go experience that and do that.
You can say you sound like a spoiled brat, but based on you growing up in the ski world and living 15 minutes or 20 minutes from that glacier, if you didn't go to one of those camps when you were a kid, I would feel bad for you because all of your friends and everybody you knew were trying to get up on that glacier. So I wouldn't say you're a spoiled brat. You were just lucky as shit that you were able to go, because anybody who went to those things was lucky.
Yeah, for sure.
The next big move for you is you talked about getting the wild card for the Freeride World Tour, and you did that. But I'm going to fast forward a little bit because you'd done a couple one-off events, but that type of skiing and contest skiing is kind of what you were built for, is big mountain skiing in a contest format. And when you get on the full-on Freeride World Tour, it's like Euro Trip 2.0. You go and do a bunch of different stops. Like the first one, I forget where it is, but you get fourth place. The second event, you go to Chamonix and you take second. And you're like 20 or 21 years old at this time. And celebration-wise for you, I mean, do you like to go out and send it off the hill as well? Like, do you like to throw back a bunch of beers?
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of partying in those days for sure. I went to Chamonix one time and I didn't even ski. I kind of went with like a sore shoulder. I just partied the whole time, and the contest got canceled. That was like the next year, my second year on the tour. But yeah, that was fun. The tour back in those days, it was awesome. Everybody was having a good time together, the staff, the athletes, and I was enjoying it.
And you had mentioned that with slopestyle contests, you're going and skiing bulletproof ice at different places, and it wasn't really fun. It seemed like with some of those big mountain contests that you would fly all the way across the world to a place that had shit snow, and then they'd be like, look, you've got to go because we've got to get this contest going. Did you experience that as well?
Yeah, I did. And that's kind of when I started to get over it. I think I got lucky the first 2 years I did it. The snow conditions were lining up. It was powder. We were skiing epic lines in Chamonix, stuff like that. And then, yeah, like you said, the conditions started to not line up, and descending, the expectations kept getting higher and higher. You have to keep bettering yourself from the year before. And that's when it started to not become as fun.
And when you decide to go on the Euro Trip 2.0 is what I'm calling it, or go on the Freeride World Tour full on, is that when you also make the decision that Park and Pipe and the Olympics aren't going to be in your future, that you're going to take a different direction in your skiing?
Yeah, for sure. I'd even made that decision before. I used to be like on the BC or the provincial national team. And I decided after a couple of years of that, I wasn't going to do that. And then I was just skiing for fun with my friends in Whistler, Blackcomb. And so I was already set on no Olympics.
Okay. So then you make the trip, you're in Chamonix. And can you describe how much of an impact Chamonix had on you? Because I think it's one of those places that once you get on that tram and you get up to the top, it's just like a game-changing thing for all skiers that I've never experienced.
If I didn't snowmobile and I wanted to just ski, that's where I'd live. It's completely different zone. You're dealing with mountains here where the whole mountain gets skied out in 1 to 2 hours. The people there, majority of them don't even ski up the groomers. And that's still such a shock. I don't even know if people really understand that. Like literally off the groomers will be powder, like days after a storm.
It's wild.
So it's a crazy spot. And I was super fortunate through the tour meeting all these Europeans, Leo Taliaferro, Toff Henry RP, they took me out and took me on some of the craziest skiing, hugest couloirs and epic conditions. Yeah, I was so stoked for that.
If Chamonix was eye-opening, what was it like when you fly into Alaska for the first time? Is that intimidating, exciting? What were your first impressions when you get to Haines?
Alaska's tricky, it's all weather orientated. And especially when we were out there, we were just going to ski like 2 runs, basically. We did our warm-up run on a little face and then we go compete. So it wasn't necessarily skiing there. I was just hanging out, kind of partying again. I was fortunate though, my dad and his buddy drove up from Pemberton with all our sleds on the back of one truck. So I had something to do when I was there, which was sweet.
So is that how all those contests are? You really aren't getting time to go out and like just party shred with everybody? It's more you're there for 2 lines and that's about it?
Specifically just in Alaska because there isn't a resort around, but the other times if the snow is good, you are kind of party shredding, checking out the mountains, checking out everything, got to kill the time, not just going to sit in my hotel room for the weak weather window.
It's time for my final sponsor break, and I can't tell you how much I love my gear from Outdoor Research. When I signed on with OR, I knew there wasn't an outerwear brand on the market that performs as well as what OR is developing. That's what happens when you test your gear in the absolutely terrible conditions that we can get here in the Pacific Northwest. Days in the mountains are always more fun when you're warm and dry, and I know my OR gear will always deliver that. I'll tell you, on cold days, I live in my cold front hoodie, which is hands down the warmest and most stylish puffy I've ever owned. And then when I get on snow, my snow crew jacket and pants are not only warm, but it's one of those fits where if you don't see me ski, I look like a pro. I'm so impressed with the style that OR has been bringing to the table lately. And off snow, they sent me some Feroci pants, which are now my daily drivers. Think stylish, lightweight, packable, do-anything pants with the right amount of zippered pockets and stretch to be the only pant that you'll ever need. I love them. And really, I've been loving OR products since I bought my first OR rain jacket in 2000. And I'm going to save you 25% on your OR gear. Here's what you need to do. Head on over to outdoorresearch.com, go shopping, and when you check out, enter the code SNOW25 and you'll get the deal. That's all caps, no spaces, and the number 25. My final sponsor this round is Best Day Brewing. If you haven't heard of Best Day, they are hands down the best tasting non-alcoholic beer on the market. I enjoy Best Day for so many reasons. The flavor is the most important. I swear by the hazy IPA, the Kolsch, and the Belgian White. They all taste just as good or better than their alcoholic cousins. And I'll tell you, while I haven't quit drinking, when I go to the bar, after 3 or 4 beers, I usually feel like it's time for me to head home, and everyone thinks I'm lame. But lately, I have a new routine. I'll have a Best Day every 3rd beer, and it makes my night last twice as long. And we all know lasting longer is better. If you want to have your best day or night ever, or just enjoy a few cold ones at Après, grab a Best Day, and you can forget about the calories, forget about the alcohol, and forget about getting in trouble on the way home. To see all the flavors and order some beer, head on over to bestday.com. And if you're flying Alaska, you can now get a Best Day Kolsch at 30,000 feet. Those are my sponsors. Now let's get back into the podcast. In Haines, you win the event there. And when you think of that first big season of travel for the Freeride World Tour, everything was so new. You're doing really, really well. What were the events or the things that really stood out to you from that first year on tour?
That first season on the tour, it was awesome. I was doing well. I was winning money too, which was sweet. I was so stoked when I won Alaska. It was like 12,000 US or something, and which is crazy. I was like, oh, I'm going to get a better sled next year. Is basically what I thought. I was so stoked. Yeah, unfortunately, the tour now is not paying too much money for first place.
What's first place get now?
I think it's like 5.
Oh man, and they have like what, 5 or 6 stops?
Yeah, which is honestly is kind of why I stopped doing it. The prize money kept going down and the risk was just so high. There's variables. It's so hard to win one of those. And if you can win more than one, that's pretty lucky. Because like if you do one trick, it's almost like a 50-50 if you're going to land it or not.
I mean, it's just crazy that nowadays, if you win all 5 events or all 6 events, say, that means you're the best in the world at this type of skiing on a professional level. You're going to win $30,000. For any other professional athlete, you couldn't get them to do anything for $30,000, especially not risk their life.
Oh, I know. Exactly. That just comes down to the demographic of skiing, how many people ski. Not as many people as play soccer.
I mean, you can say that, but in terms of recreational skiers, there's a shitload of people out there, and they are somehow able to pay people like Michaela Schifrin a shit ton of money. So I think it just depends on the category of skiing you're in, because
that too.
Ski racers make a lot of money. And you know what? I don't know anybody that ski races really at this point in life. You know, when they're 15, sure, I knew a lot of people, but most people I know now don't ski race. And if they do, they don't pay full price for their skis because they get like pro night stuff. So there are a decent amount of skiers. There's like 11 million skiers out there as of like 2021. And I know that because I did some research for a different podcast and I pulled that out.
Right.
But there's a bunch of people that ski out there. It sucks that the money isn't there. And it's funny because most people I talk about on the podcast, they don't talk about money almost in the way that you've talked about it so far, where you're like, yeah, I almost did it because the money wasn't there. Most people are always like, you know, it's not about money, it's about this and this. And while I'm sure skiing is about the feeling and about everything that you love about the sport, the money plays into it for you too. That's important, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm trying to make a living too. I can go ahead and say, oh, I'm just doing it for the fun, you know, but that's really not true. I'm not risking my life to do it for the fun. I'm doing it as a job. And that's kind of what it becomes more and more. It is a job. You know, that's how I pay my bills. But then going back to the tour, another reason why I stopped doing the tour was because I was going to Europe 4 times a winter. And it just, every time I swear I was in Europe, it was like bad conditions. And then at home, it was good conditions. Then I got home, it was bad conditions. I was just like, oh, I can't keep leaving BC. Like, it's the best place to do this. I want to be here more.
Yeah, I can totally see that. And I got that from a lot of people is like they're stuck somewhere else with no snow and at home there's 2 feet of fresh and they have to compete in this contest that's going to totally suck. That's kind of happened to you as well. And, you know, and speaking of the money, who are the brands that pay you?
Rossignol, Red Bull, Oakley, Lecky, and then the rest are just gear and stuff. You know, I get my free sleds from Polaris. But yeah, those are the big tickers. I hope I didn't forget one. I don't think I did.
Do they pay you in Canadian money or are you getting paid in dollars and euros?
Yeah, it just depends. I get some US money and some Canadian money. No Euro money, though.
The US money would be better, right?
Oh, yeah. Exchange rate?
Yeah. And then can you make a couple 100,000 loonies from skiing each year?
Yeah, I mean, after taxes, I don't know. It depends. I feel like it's like the ski racing. It's like the top people, they're making tons of money. But I know people that are competing on the same circuit they're making way less money than I'm making.
But you're able to make a couple $100,000 and your focus in life is putting together a great film part, I would think. Making people say, holy shit, at a movie theater. And I guess you have like the mandatory toys that you need, the truck and the sled. Do you own a home?
No house, just a piece of dirt. But let's not get too carried away. I'm not making more than $200,000 here.
No, I mean, but that's great.
I wish. But also the expenses for filming are a lot. You know, I spend a crazy amount on fuel. You know, you need a good snowmobile. Fortunately, I get that covered for. And you need a truck. It's not like you just get to pocket all this money that you're making. It really kind of, you just got to put it back into what you're doing.
Yep. And then I guess on top of contracts, you're able to make money in contests. And I think your best contest win was a couple years later at Kicking Horse. You got a 98, which is an unreal score. And the send that you had for a contest was absolutely gigantic. And with that one, do you kind of see the whole field avoid that drop and think to yourself, well, if I land that one, I win?
Exactly. You know, I'm picking out multiple lines before these contests. You know, I'll have 2 lines and, you know, there's either going to be the one that I know or think can win or the one that's, you know, a safer line that, you know, there's a chance to be on the podium. Basically every contest I'm going in, I'm trying to win. You know, I'm not there for fun. I'm trying to win. But I'd actually talked to my dad on the phone because this was one of the first contests where I was able to have service. Because when I was in Europe, you know, I didn't have a phone plan over there. I remember the Euros were like watching the live stream, seeing what's happening. I was like, oh, what's going on over there? Looking over the shoulder. But my dad called me. He's like, oh yeah, Marcus Eder, he just sent it pretty big. And, you know, when he said that, I was like, all right, guess we're going with line A. And so I didn't know it would work out, but that's the gamble, you know, lots of variables. And I was lucky to ride that one out.
I think you end up tearing your MCL at the end of your last season at a Freeride World Tour event. And that sucks. But I think the bright side is that you're back filming with MSP for the next season. And did it feel like at one point that you had achieved MSP level success? Then you went back down to the minor leagues and did different projects. And now you're getting called up to the big leagues again?
No, I didn't. I never felt that. I think when I was younger, I didn't even really realize it. I think when I just started doing the tour and then I got the opportunity to go filming again, it was a full new opportunity because I had a whole new array of talents and ability that I didn't have when I was younger.
And I think some of the talents you're talking about is your sledding skills as well, because you've developed them at that point. And the one thing that you really want to tick off in your segment in that movie is backflipping your sled. You didn't get it for the movie, but it wasn't without lack of trying because you tried a whole bunch. And
Yeah.
between what we saw in that movie and then other attempts, how many different jump shapes and tries does it take to land your first backflip?
Oh, I means some people get lucky, they get it first try. I definitely thought it was going to be easier than it was. I was expecting to land it first try. I thought it was good, but not like skiing for me, at least. It took a few tries, and it's really hard for me to balance snowmobiling and skiing. I get paid to ski. I don't get paid to snowmobile.
Right.
I love to snowmobile, but I'm not going to go out there and kind of injure myself doing something that I'm not getting paid to do. Sponsors aren't going to like that. And I'm not going to feel good about myself if I do that. I'm going to feel like I'm letting people down if I'm getting injured doing not what I'm getting paid to do.
Well, you definitely put yourself at risk when you were trying it for sure. I mean, I saw the sled land on you a couple different times, it seemed like. What was the worst of the punishment that you experienced from trying to land the backflip?
Yeah, definitely the snowmobile landing on top of me. It actually didn't hurt that much. I was also young and spry. I'm sure if it hit me now, I'm 28 now. If it landed on me now, it'd probably hurt a bit more.
Yeah, I think you just landed one a couple weeks ago, didn't you?
No, I wish. I posted one. That was the last one I did.
Okay, yeah, I saw it a couple weeks ago then.
Yeah, it's getting harder to balance snowmobiling and skiing. I'm definitely focusing more on skiing. So the goal is to do another one this year too, though.
Okay. When you finally land the backflip, what's that feeling like? Is it kind of the same feeling as winning a contest, or is it totally different?
It's a good feeling for sure. The first one I did was kind of not a true backflip. It was like an underflip thing. I was out with my dad early season. But yeah, it's a good feeling. It's like landing any trick or, any kind of rush or high you get from doing something for the first time.
And then the next season for MSP's Stomping Grounds, there's a gigantic cliff that you land so cleanly. How big do you think that cliff was?
I don't know. I think it was probably like 80 feet, 80-ish. Yeah.
Is that something that you see and hit on the same day, or is it something that you're eyeing for a few days and then you tell yourself you got it? How does that thing work its way into getting into the movie?
That is something I see that day and we hit. I actually did a little like breakdown review video of it. So if anybody wants to go check that out, go check my socials and whatnot. But it was basically like end of the day, end of the season too. So I'm never doing anything where I think I can get hurt. But this one I was like, whatever, if I crash, I'm going to crash. I'm not going to miss out on much. So I just went and sent it.
Is that the biggest cliff you've ever hit?
No, it's not. There was a hit I did in my sled ski edit with Red Bull that to me was way bigger. I took off and I thought I was going to eat shit, but I landed that one too. Maybe I'll post that one on the socials here. Show somebody. Yeah.
I got to check that one out. And then what's the fear level when you're going to hit something like that? Is your heart pounding out of your chest? Is there a Zen moment of calm? How does that all line up for you?
There's the nerves for sure. They basically all go away once you drop in. I feel like you kind of stop thinking about it. You're very focused on the line, exactly where you need to be in your trajectory. But yeah, the nerves never go away when you're hitting something big like that. That's for sure.
Protection wise, is it just a helmet and mouth guard and that's it? Or do you have back protection and other pads?
I wear some kind of little padded shorts. I actually need to get a new pair. They have some holes in them from literally some crashes. And then, yeah, mouth guard, helmet. I'm always wearing a helmet every time I'm going skiing. There's no reason to not, in my opinion. I'm not risking my head, my life for looks or something, Seems silly to me that some people don't, but it's just the way that it is.
Yeah. And then with the mouth guard, do you break teeth or get concussions first and then realize, oh, I should wear a mouth guard? Or is it just something that's always been part of your program?
It has been something that's been a part of my program since day one, but I have gotten knocked out with my mouth guard in. But, I'm sure it would have been worse. Well, I know that one time I would have lost my teeth if I didn't have my mouth guard in because I need myself in the chin.
Oh, man. I'm sure you have bad crashes every year. Like if you think back to last year, what was the worst crash of last season?
Jeez, last season. Honestly, last season was like one of the first seasons I like barely had to go to physio. My body stayed in good shape all year. Actually, I did like this big cork 7 and I kind of Tommied after it. That was probably the worst one.
Okay. Well, you're known for tricking in the backcountry. And thinking about that, like, what's the biggest switch cliff you've landed?
That's the thing. So being with Rosignol, I didn't really have twin tip skis. So I really like my switch skiing ability in powder never kind of developed. I can do it, but I'm not doing any Charlie Yeager, Lee Powers, or Pet Fuas big 180s into the POW.
What's the worst price you've paid for landing switch in the backcountry then?
That would be it. That one time I kneed myself in the face, straight to the chin, rung my bell. And we were deep in the backcountry too. And I was like, okay, I got to go home. Not feeling too hot here. So I took like a week and a half off. I felt really completely fine, but I thought I should give myself at least a week.
And with everything you do, there's kind of a wow factor. Like, holy shit, that was huge. Or could you believe he doubled that? Do you go to locations looking for features that, while they're really high risk, will pack a punch that no one will even think about doing?
Yep, exactly. I feel like that's what everybody likes. Like exactly that same term you use is a wow factor. And that's what I incorporated into my Freeride roller tour. You can do some big errors and, fall line, but you need to have that wow factor. That's what people remember. I mean, that's how you get viral clips and whatnot. I'm always looking for that wow factor.
To do that, I mean, every year with your job, you need to up the ante to create a new wow factor that's going to get people talking about you. Is that frightening, or is it more that's what you do?
I don't think about it pre-season. It just kind of comes. When I'm out there in the mountains, I will get lucky enough and see something that looks crazy. But, again, saying that, I'm not skiing lines that are life or death. I don't put myself in positions out there where I can die. It's just, it's not worth it to me. Nothing's worth that,
Yeah.
So I will look for the wow factor, but I'm not trying to go over the top. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, you say you're not trying to go over the top, but in thinking about it, like looking at anywhere from here, do you tell yourself, like, yeah, I can throw a 7 and a big backflip on an AK line, and if that doesn't fire people off, then the closing cliff that I'm going to do is going to fucking blow minds?
Yeah, I mean, like, again, that's the wow factor, but I'm trying to be calculated. I'm not doing that stuff with a no fall zone below me. I'm doing it where if I fall, I'm going to be all right, sort of deal.
Okay. I've seen the movie this year, but I haven't seen it enough to where I can go back and say, oh, you had this cliff, and they were crazy because I just saw it once and I was emceeing the premiere. But did you have anything in this movie this year that compares to those past two enders that you've had the past couple years?
Last season, I skied this, it's probably one of the wilder lines in my life. It was this super knife edge, spiny pillow thing.
Yep.
That was probably like my highlight from last year. Just a different kind of line than I've seen out there and that I've skied. To me, that was my wow factor. I'm sure other people watching the movie have different thoughts of different shots that I did that they thought were better too.
Okay. Well, we've been going for a little bit, and while I could ask you what your plan is this winter, I'm sure you're going to go film with MSP, you're going to sled a lot, you're going to up the ante again. And at this point in the show, I have something that I call inappropriate questions. I get someone that knows you to ask 3 questions, and they can be anything. And I was able to get arguably the best skier of right now to ask the questions. And I say arguably the best skier of right now because I'm talking about a guy who kills it in the backcountry. He kills it in contests. Just anything that he does right now seems to be gold. I'm talking about Colby Stevenson. And are you ready for question number 1 from Colby?
Yeah. I figured you were going to go with Colby after that intro. I'm ready. Is this a segment you have to ask, but I don't have to answer?
Yeah, I mean,
if I don't want to.
Yeah, you don't have to answer anything if you don't want to. But I think these are going to be fine.
Okay.
What happened on the night after you won the kicking horse stop of the Freeride World Tour? Was there anything crazy during that party?
Man, the one thing I remember is I lost my wallet, and that sucked. That was probably the craziest thing, but like any other comp I won on the tour, we're going hard at the bar. Spending a bit of money too. Got to spend that prize money, 10% or whatever.
So you do that in the Freeride World Tour world as well. The 10% thing's not just for Simon Dumont and his crew. It's for any kind of contest crew, at least back then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we were buying lots of Jaeger bombs.
All right, let's jump into question number 2.
Where is the most illegal place that you've ridden your snowmobile?
Jeez, I don't know. Probably just through town. on the roads and stuff at nighttime. I ain't going out into the parks and stuff. Can't be doing that illegal stuff. Probably just ripping around town.
You ever gotten a ticket on your sled?
No, I've never been chased either, but if they were chasing me, I don't think they're going to catch me.
All right, let's go with this next inappropriate question.
What is one of the wildest stories from your life that not that many people know, but is still okay to share?
All right, so this one's a very broad one. That could be anything.
All right, yeah. It's weird. Some of these questions you're asking, I feel like I was just thinking about like the other day, but maybe they're just that ingrained into my mind. But this one's skiing orientated and party orientated. Freeride World Tour, my first year, Chamonix. I came second. I was hyped. We were partying. And I really don't know how it happened, but we had some power tripping security guards. And I got like batoned in the leg over my iPhone, like snapped the iPhone, huge bruise on my leg. I got hit again in the arm. It was like a battle against these security guards. Craig Murray and his crew, they got pepper sprayed. That was downtown Chamonix. Everything was all right after. And we kept partying that night till early in the morning because that's how it goes over in Europe. But that's probably the craziest thing.
Yeah, man, I've never been batoned by a security guard before, so I think you can check that one off your list. Colby has a fourth and final inappropriate question. We usually do 3, but he can do 4 because he's Colby Stevenson. Let's go with that question, and here it is.
What kind of rituals or traditions do you and your dad have or that he's passed down to you?
All right, so a deep one right there.
I mean, I'm not a superstitious person. We ain't too ritual based. My dad's pretty straight edge. We're not religious or anything like that, but that's a tough question. I don't know. We don't really have anything like that, but I would say just snowmobiling together. Deep snow.
You ever go out and have beers with your dad?
Not a ton. No, not really.
All right. Maybe you should do that one time.
Yeah. No, I'm around him, when he's drinking lots of beers. So.
All right. Well, that is Inappropriate Questions, and that's our podcast. And looking at your life and times, you were born and bred to be a mountain man. And while some kids are brought up with a path to college and a 9-to-5, that's never been the case for you. It's all about being outdoors as much as possible, working your ass off, and pushing the limits. And while I'm sure it's hard to follow in your famous ski dad's footsteps at times, the way you ski, the way you stomp the shit out of things, well, you're creating your own ski legacy, and it's pretty cool to see, and I thank you for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for this interview. That was sweet.
So that was time with Logan Pehota, and man, it's hard to describe how big that kid goes. And he's not really a kid, he's an adult. But it's also hard to describe how solid he stomps the shit out of his landings in a podcast. So I highly recommend checking out his MSP segments and what I put on my socials, as Ben and Murray from Matchstick Productions hooked me up with some gold this week. At the end of the day, Logan Pehota is a second-generation pro skier and badass mountain man, and I guess you could say like father, like son. That's the podcast for this week. At this point, I want to thank you for listening, and now it's time for the review of the week, and it's another 5-star review that comes from Nate D23. It's titled, Still the Best. I was introduced to the show by a couple of ladies sipping Fireball on Chair 2 in Vail. I was skeptical to say the least, but here I am still listening 4 years later. Mike does an amazing job with the interviews, but also makes you feel like a friend is telling you the story of these amazing athletes. Well, thank you, Nate, for that awesome review. Anytime you're on a lift with 2 ladies that have Fireball, I highly recommend that you take their advice and do whatever they say, as it could come pay dividends later on, and I hope you had an amazing day with them after your chairlift ride. I lived in Vail for a few years. I know all about Chair 2. While I can't afford to go there anymore because I am not an Epic Pass holder and I'm not going to pay $300 a day to go ski there, it was a great place that I used to call home. Hopefully one day I'll be able to show my son what Vail is all about, but I guess what Vail is all about now is having a lot of money. Back then it really wasn't. Either way, I did love the terrain. I could ramble on, but I'm not. Thank you very much for that review. Please email me with your mailing address at mike@thepowellmovement.com, and I'll make sure to send you something awesome. It won't be Fireball, I will tell you that, but it will be something great. Thanks for doing that. For everyone else out there, I don't ask much of you. I don't beg for your money on a Patreon. I just give you free content week in and week out. All I really want from you is to review my show. And it's not that big of an ask, so here's how you do it. First, hit that podcast icon on your iPhone, if you have an iPhone. If you don't, well, I think you have to figure it out on your own because I'm an idiot. Second, search for the Powell Movement. And even if you already subscribe, you still need to search for the Powell Movement. Third, click my logo. Fourth, scroll down to where you see the stars. Fifth, star rate me and review the podcast. This only takes about 30 seconds to a minute, and it's greatly appreciated. It helps me tremendously in the algorithm, and it gets more earballs on the podcast, and I'm all about earballs, so please do that. I thank you for it. I also thank you for supporting my incredible sponsors. They are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.